Hello and welcome to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, the podcast for all things marketing. And this week we've got a fascinating interview. So why not grab a cup of tea, coffee, or whatever it is you want to drink and sit down and spend 25 minutes with me and my special guest. So we have a fantastic guest today. I am very lucky to be joined by Lucy Halley, Executive Head of Strategy at the agency Havas CX Helia. Welcome to the podcast, Lucy.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. As is tradition on this podcast, we start every interview with what I call the credibility section, and we have listeners from around the world. So it's good that people understand who you are, your career, your experience, and the sort of context and perspective from which you're talking. So would you mind giving us a quick rundown of your who you are and your career and what you're currently doing, please?
Yeah, of course. So as you say, I'm Exec Head of Strategy for Havas CX Helia in the UK. So I've been with Helia in London, in King's Cross for about the past 4 years, and I recently took over responsibility for the strategy team out of our Cirencester office as well. So Havas CX Helia is one of the CX agencies in the Havas network. And my background, before I joined Helia, I've worked in, what were traditionally called direct marketing agencies or CRM or CX agencies for 25 years now, when I did the maths on this morning, which
it is horrible when you start to add it up,
depressing
isn't it? Yeah.
Statistic. So I've worked in agencies like EHYB Room, which has obviously grown up to become Havas CX Helia. So in fact, I've gone full circle during that time. I worked at RAP for a period of time, KitKat Nor, which went on to become Digitas while I was there. And I've worked across a full range of different clients and different sectors, everything from kind of fundraising to financial services and everything in between. Started my career, in fact, in client services as an account manager before moving over into the strategy department about 10 years ago.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's an interesting... you said something interesting there about direct marketing, the old days of direct marketing. And I still think that's a term that's wildly misunderstood. When people say direct marketing, they always think you mean direct mail. I was always brought up that direct marketing is anything that invokes a response, whether it's TV or anything else. But as you say, it's kind of CRM has kind of morphed into different names. And obviously you have, as you've articulated, CX in the title of your agency. So when I look at what CX is defined as, it seems to not have a truly universal definition. You hear some people talk about UX, some people talk about customer service, some people talk about CRM. So how does Havas define it?
Yeah, it's a bit problematic, isn't it? It's used very differently by different people. And in fact,
yes.
I think we're on the same journey that we were on when we shifted from direct marketing to CRM a number of years ago. I remember being at a kind of speed dating event for clients and agencies.
Those things are always fun.
Absolute fun. About 10 or so years ago. And, kind of finding myself sitting alongside kind of technology companies, people doing CRM software, etc., and thinking, gosh, we do completely different things. Like, I don't think this can be quite right. And I think CX is kind of on a similar journey there. And it is tough, because Havas created the CX network, bringing together all of our CX agencies a couple of years ago. And so we partner with other CX agencies in that network, but, they're very differently shaped from us. So we partner with agencies like Envica, who do digital transformation, Gate One, who are our management consultancy, who do more sort of business transformation. But Helia's flavour of customer experience is it's really about creativity, and it's about putting strategy, data and creativity at the heart of what we do in creating more meaningful experiences for customers. And I think the important thing is, that can happen wherever a customer shows up in a client's ecosystem. I think part of the problem is there had been a real kind of narrowing in the definition of CRM, and CRM agencies were kind of increasingly getting pigeonholed as the email agency, which of course was never a true reflection of what we did.
No, absolutely.
But actually, if you think about those words, if you think about the words customer relationship management, I still think that's really at the heart of what we do. And, as a CX agency or as a CRM agency, we're uniquely placed because I think we do have that understanding and the potential to really kind of own the customer. And then thinking about how do we manage them through their journey? How do we create those really meaningful experiences for them? And, ultimately kind of drive those value-driving behaviours that a client's looking for. So getting them to buy again, getting them to advocate on our behalf, et cetera, et cetera. And, we can do that wherever they show up across that ecosystem, be it in digital channels, physical channels. I think the key thing for me is the ability to be able to, kind of continue that conversation wherever they show up. So it does feel, consistent and coherent across all of those different channels and touch points.
And so taking that kind of context, that's I think by its nature, CX has to be a broad definition, right? Because you're talking about, you said the phrase meaningful experiences, whether that's digital in a retail environment, wherever it may be. How has that definition worked with your clients' expectations? Or are clients on the same kind of path as you in the sense of CX is CRM, which is email marketing? Like, because obviously a lot of clients have big silos, and retail doesn't necessarily talk to e-com and all that sort of stuff. So how has that worked when you're trying to sort of pitch that into a client?
I think clients are probably largely on a similar journey to us. I think it does bring some additional complexity, because if a client truly embraces CX, it can't be just a marketing effort. As you say, it has to be a cross-organizational effort, and it does require to kind of either break down or for people to reach out and work across those different silos in a client organization. So that can be tricky to navigate. And honestly, we've been on a massive learning curve. So when we take on a big CX engagement, really identifying who are our kind of key stakeholders across the client organization and making sure that we engage them very early in that process so that they feel that they've been listened to, they've been understood, and we take them on that journey with us. Because that's critical to success, not kind of presenting them with a kind of finished future state CX at the end of a process and then them sitting and giving us all the reasons why it can't possibly happen. I think stakeholder management has become an increasingly important aspect of our role. And often, clients rely on us to be able to join the dots across their organization. I think often as an external agency, it's almost easier for us to do that than sometimes, clients themselves find that quite tricky to navigate.
Yeah, and I think there's things like different KPIs get involved and different targets and all that kind of fun stuff can make it difficult. So if we talk about an experience then, and defining a kind of meaningful experience, I think the idea of expectations, customer expectations, is kind of crucial in that equation. And I was looking at your own proprietary meaningful brands research, he says, reading from his script so he remembers what to say properly, which shows 77% of respondents expect brands to make a difference to my life, but only 40% think that they do. And only a global average of 40% of consumers think the brands they interact with are, quote unquote, centered on their needs as a customer, according to your X-Index research. So if you think about that as a seesaw, you can either lower expectations or you can raise capability to match expectations. So first of all, how do you figure out what the expectations a customer has of a brand are? How do you figure out where their expectations are currently set?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for us that everything that we do as an agency puts customers front and center. And there's a really, big focus on bringing together clients' own first-party data, third-party data sources we have available to us, proprietary research we have, like meaningful brands like the X-Index, etc., our loyalty framework, and using those things to understand where are customers' pain points across an existing experience, or where might the opportunities lie. And I think the real thing for me is I think there's no substitute to actually talking to customers in real life. And I'm a massive fan, and actually I don't think we do it enough as strategists, but I'm a massive fan of strategists moderating their own qualitative research and really spending time with customers, listening to, understanding what's going on in their lives, really walking a mile in their shoes, because I think that's invaluable. We also get it through. I think it's kind of terribly old fashioned now. I used to do it loads back in the day when I was working on British Gas at EHS Brand. But we used to go and sit in the call centre in Uddingston and listen to the calls. And actually that can be such a great source of insight. And I was saying to a client the other day, can we come and can we sit and we listen with some of your call handlers? Again, that's really invaluable to understand, when stuff's going wrong and, how that's being resolved. So
you'll never see, so to interrupt you, I worked at Vodafone for 8 odd years. A lot of time in call centers, and it's hilarious. You create a beautifully crafted product or proposition or something, and it crumbles so quickly in the face like somebody at the other end of a call center in wherever they are trying to understand it. You're absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more on the call centers.
Yeah.
Or working in a retail store is a great one as well.
And it's interesting, actually, at various points at Helia, we've kind of described ourselves as the method actors of the CX world. And we have had a real focus of, Starbucks is a client, and we've been baristas in a Starbucks for a day. We've stacked shelves in Tesco's, and all of those things give you really, really brilliant insight. And again, just back to my previous point about stakeholder management, that isn't just about engaging senior level stakeholders, so clearly that's important, but also, if you're talking to people, who are in the front line, who are working in the stores, who are manning the phones in the call centers, they can give you such valuable insight into your customers and what's kind of going on in their lives. I think the key thing for me, though, is that we can't rely on customers to kind of solve those problems. So we can talk to them to help identify pain points and opportunities, but it's that classic kind of Henry Ford faster horse thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, customers don't know what the solve for those things is. They can only, refer to other sort of positive CX experiences they've potentially had with other brands out of sector, that kind of thing. So I think that's really where it's our responsibility to bring our creativity and kind of really ideate around those problems and meet those, sort of imagine those new solutions that are going to meet or exceed those customer expectations.
Yeah, and you made the point about expectations and other competitors. So if we think about how a brand sort of sets the right expectations in some ways, and also then how is that thwarted in some ways by the people who are the best. Everyone, there's a great sketch. Ronnie Chang is a stand-up comedian I talked about the other day. He talks about Amazon. He was talking about Amazon Prime, and it's like, soon it'll be Amazon before. It won't be Amazon now. It'll be Amazon before. And so how do experiences set by competitors, do you think, outside of a brand's category influence expectations? And how do you try and keep a lid on it in some way, because people's capability, Amazon have built that over 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
How do you kind of keep a lid on those expectations or manage them?
So I suppose to the first point, I totally agree. Like, we almost never just do competitor reviews now for clients. We almost always do comparator reviews as well, because I think, customers are having their expectations set by brands that are operating outside of the client's own sector. And often, clients can look at their competitor set, and they might be working in a sector where the CX bar is set quite low, and they can kind of congratulate themselves on doing a really great job. But compared to other brands that your customers are buying from, like, that might simply not be good enough. Your customers want, the transparency of an Uber and being able to see exactly where your cab is and when it's arriving. They want the speed of an Amazon Prime. They want the personalized content and experiences that Netflix offers. So I think it's 100% true that those kind of expectations are increasingly being set by brands operating out of a client's own sector. We need to look more broadly about what sort of constitutes a best-in-class customer experience in order to kind of help clients understand that. And then in terms of, how kind of clients take that on, and I think one of the key things for me is that we don't overpromise and underdeliver. And you alluded to that meaningful brands research, because I think that's where you see a lot of clients coming unstuck, or a lot of brands coming unstuck. It's that sort of gap between expectation and reality. I saw it a lot in the mobile phone sector when I was working on that, and some of the kind of the bigger, more expensive providers, you have quite a high expectation of service. So when that goes wrong, they've got a really long way to fall. Whereas some of the kind of cheaper or newer entrants to the market, there was less of an expectation of the service. And so when customers had a positive experience, it was sort of heightened even further. So that was really good. And I think, like trust and transparency, I mean, they've probably been words which have been much overused by agencies and clients alike over years. But actually, I think they are becoming increasingly important, and particularly important for younger consumers. And I think, being really open and honest when stuff's gone wrong is actually a really good opportunity. Like, if you can resolve that positively, it's a really good opportunity to turn a detractor into a promoter. And the example I always talk about is I had, this is years ago now, but it's still such a great example. I had a really, really great experience with Carphone Warehouse. where I'd bought a new phone, and then they sent me a letter the next week saying, don't you hate it when you've bought something in a shop and then the next week you see it in the sale, and attached a voucher for the difference
Oh,
in price. I wasn't even aware that the phone I'd bought was in the sale, but the fact that they'd kind of been front foot about it, the fact that they'd been really open and transparent about it, and then had done something to put that situation right. Such a positive experience. I didn't actually redeem the voucher, but I've told so many people over the years about this brilliant experience that I had with Car Phone Warehouse. So I do think, consumers are really smart. They're really savvy, and more so all the time. So you can't pull the wool over their eyes. I think you do have to be really, really open, really honest, really transparent, hold your hands up when things go wrong. But if you can put those things right in a sort of good and constructive way, then you've got the opportunity to really kind of transform that relationship.
yeah. Someone should mention that price drop thing to Elon Musk, maybe. Who knows? But I think the key word also there is consistency. Because I've worked on brands where they've talked about being customer centric. I'm like, that's not strictly true, is it? Because customer centric, to my definition, demands some sort of sacrifice. In a sense of, that sounds very dramatic, but in a sense of, I'm going to sacrifice some short-term revenue potentially to do the right thing by my customer. And a lot of brands don't want to do that. And so when they then talk about being customer centric, you're like, no, you're not. Which is what Car Phone Warehouse did, was actually say, okay, maybe we're going to take a bit of a hit on this, or we're going to, but let's do it because it's the right thing to do. And that consistency is super important. Which then leads me to the kind of next question around, what do you think are the biggest blockers then that stops a brand creating a customer experience that meets those expectations and builds that trust and over time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure most people working in a CX agency would tell you the same thing at the moment. I do think like data and tech is still a massive blocker for clients, and clients, all shapes and sizes. Like the number of times I've gone into a big client and thought, this lot are going to have their acts together on this stuff, and they really don't. And often it's worse actually. Do you know what? Because they've got so much data and it's sitting in all of these kind of separate pots that are really difficult to bring together. They've got lots of legacy kind of technology systems that are sort of held together with sticky tape. Although I said this to another client earlier this week, and she said, "Lucy, that sounds great. Ours aren't even held together with sticky tape. They're not held together at all."
You would take sticky tape.
Yeah, sticky tape would be a win. So I still think it's a massive challenge, and will continue to be so, right, for a number of years. But I think the key thing for me is that we don't allow that to hold us back in creating better experiences for customers. I think one of the really key things for me is at the outset of an engagement with a new client, we kind of go in and we understand accurately what is that data and tech landscape that we're sort of working with, and making sure that things we go on to recommend are practically applicable, because there's nothing more frustrating for client or for agency than us going in and going, like, let's do all of this amazing stuff, and then going, yeah, maybe in 5 years' time, Lucy, but not today. So I think that kind of understanding is super important. And then, we try to be really pragmatic in our approach. So often there's kind of quick wins or there's workarounds that we can affect. And so we can get something like that sort of target future state experience live. And we can do that relatively quickly. And it helps us to kind of prove the efficacy of our approach of what we're recommending. It builds trust and confidence across the client organization. And then we can sort of ladder towards the ideal solution over time as that kind of data and tech piece, sort of develops in parallel. But if we're waiting for a sort of perfect data and tech landscape to be working with, we're going to be waiting indefinitely, frankly.
Yeah, that's one of the good things. If you ever get a chance to work for a startup, it's always great fun because they've got a blank piece of paper and you can kind of build it from scratch, which is delightful. I think the other one I'd throw in there is KPIs. KPIs not being aligned, so that they're not joined up. I've told this story a million times, but working on a bank in Australia, working for the consumer finance team, and it was for a personal loan. And basically they paid off their personal loan, and the consumer finance team wanted them to take out another loan because their targets were number of loans. I'm like, well, a customer who's just taken out a personal loan is going to take out another. Like the holistic view is looking at that and going, okay, well now they've got some more disposable income. Maybe we should sell them a savings product, or we should sell them at a customer. But because their KPIs were what they were, you end up just kind of in this non-optimal cycle. You mentioned technology, and this happens in CRM, CX, the whole 9 yards. And I'm not asking you about specific tech platforms, but when people are investing in tech, what do you see as the biggest sort of pitfalls that brands fall into when they're looking at buying tech that supports things like CX or CRM, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Do you know, I still think probably about 80-90% of the pitch briefs we respond to as an agency come about because a client's just made a really significant investment in a tech stack and, is probably using it to about 2% of its capabilities.
Yeah.
And so come to us and say, kind of help us realize this opportunity, help us demonstrate return on investment right back to the business. So that's it. A very sort of hot, relevant topic. I think the key thing for me is that you don't allow the technology tail to wag the customer experience dog, if that makes sense. So, yes, if you've made that investment, yes, you want to kind of show off and show that you're using your tech to its full capabilities. But I really am not a massive fan of like, we've got some cool tech stuff, let's go do it, or kind of tech for tech's sake. I think what I would really encourage clients to do is to start with what is the desired future state customer experience, and then work back from that point. What is the technology that we need to make that experience true, not the other way around?
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of people will see shiny bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Oh, that's maybe a bit condescending, but maybe they're thinking, okay, wow, look at all these amazing things that this thing can do. Great, I'm in. Spend $1 million, how much money it is, and then they think, oh, it's that old phrase, isn't it? I've got a Ferrari, but I've not no petrol to put in it, or whatever.
Yeah,
you must have heard that one. That's been going around for ages. I think that point about strategy first is really, really important, especially when you're talking about something that's joined up as a CX thing. Like, absolutely supporting that. Okay, well, that's been a really interesting conversation. We do have one other question to ask. So we have, I'm sure you've heard of Room 101.
Yes.
And we have here, Everybody Hates Your Brand, our very own sort of marketing / business Room 101. We've had all sorts of stuff. People saying, for example, like, not the right cultural fit. That was a recruiter who said that. He hates the phrase not the right cultural fit because he knows what it means, but the lack of diversity in agencies is kind of like, well, it's kind of supporting that kind of idea. And we've had all sorts of people throwing in ideas around what should go into Marketing Room 101. So you now have the chance to throw something that you hate about marketing or agencies or whatever it might be into Marketing Room 101 to live in purgatory for all of eternity. What are you putting in Marketing? Everybody Hates Your Brand Room 101.
Well, this might be a little bit controversial, especially from someone who says that, they love data and insights. Customer satisfaction surveys.
Ooh, good one.
They are a massive, massive bugbear for me. I think when you ask for a customer's feedback, you really impose on their time. And I think as an industry, I'm not saying we should never ask, but I think we need to get much better at asking. We do such a bad job of asking today. I mean, I worked on one client at one point who, following a customer transacting with the brand, they would get sent, I can't remember, it was either 4 or 5 customer satisfaction surveys or NPS surveys from various different bits of the organisation. And it's so rude. They can be a really, really useful source of insight. So I'm not saying don't do them, but I think we need to get really much better at doing them. Thinking about when you're asking a customer for their feedback, how are we helping a customer feel value in exchange for that feedback? And that's not about some sort of random competition mechanic for a gift voucher I never wanted in the first place. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think you risk massively overstating the role of your brand or your product in a customer's lives. Like, a lot of the time, customers are not thinking about this stuff. They don't want to think about this stuff, as long as it sort of functions and does what it says on the tin. Like, I don't really want to fill in a 20-question survey about, how satisfied I am with my latest brand of kitchen roll. And then do you actually need to ask those 20 questions? Like, fundamentally, what are you going to do differently as a result of those questions that you're asking, and only ask for the stuff that you need? And then also, if you're going to ask, you have to be prepared to respond to that insight as well, right? So how can we really demonstrate to customers that we're doing stuff differently as a result of what we've told them? It's not just some massive kind of tick box exercise.
I'm not a religious man at all, but I will say amen to that, because I think that because usually those surveys are couched in the sense of whether it's, even if it's a customer survey or it's a satisfaction survey or it's like a hey, tell us what you're interested in, from a CRM perspective, and we'll tailor our experience. Most don't. It just disappears into a data thing somewhere. So that idea of actually exhibiting that we are changing things as a result of what you said, so important. I think if more brands did that, then those surveys would be more taken, more listened to. Customers would be more happy to do them, etc., etc. So that's a great one. And the other thing I was reading the other day about satisfaction and how much is it, how much is it correlated to growth and retention and all that kind of stuff. There's quite a loose link there from what I can tell and what I've been reading. So I think that's a really valuable one. So I will lock that away.
Thank you.
In Everybody Hates Your Brand Marketing Room 101. That's a really, really good one. Well, thank you so much for coming on and spending the time to talk to us today, or talk to me today. It's been really, really interesting. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Lucy. Fascinating subject, fascinating interviewee. This is the first in a series of interviews we've got lined up for Everybody Hates Your Brand over the next few months. We're going to be covering all sorts of interesting topics, so please keep subscribing and please keep listening. And just remember, take great, great care and be vigilant.